Hi there and welcome to the 21st video in my series on getting started with AutoCAD. My name is Christian and in this video we're going to talk about hatches. So let's get started here. The first thing I want to do is make sure that you're aware of a problem with hatches, and that is that when you are hatching, it's possible that you can crash AutoCAD. This is not uncommon, I want you to know, especially if you're doing big complicated hatches or what AutoCAD feels like are big complicated hatches. For this reason, I'm going to show you a strategy here. I prefer to do my hatches in small groups and save all the freaking time. Again, because I just don't trust it as far as I can shoot it. So that being said, if you're following along at home and you happen to be hatching a whole bunch of stuff, like you have the walls of a house that you're hatching or something like that, especially if you've got, it happens to me a lot when I pull models in from BIM packages. From building information modeling packages like Revit or like AutoCAD, hatching just can get real hairy real quick. So there's your kind of your immediate warning and your strategy for dealing with it. Save early, save often, and hatch in small groups. Don't try and do big batch hatches. It just ends in headaches, and your computer will hang, and you'll hope and pray to whatever deity you worship that things will work out, and it will hang and hang and hang and hang and never resolve. So, and then you'll have to, force quit and lose all your data. So, that being said, you're aware of that. Let's go ahead and jump right into hatching. So the question is, what is a hatch? A hatch is a fill. So let's say you have a closed boundary and you want to fill it with lines or a pattern or a solid color. You can go ahead and do that with a hatch. So let's get started here and talk about how that works. Now, let's start with the fundamentals here. What is a closed boundary? What represents a closed boundary? So I'm going to go ahead and draw just some geometry here. You'll notice here, I left this little gap. You'll see, it's not a very big gap, but these 2 points aren't touching. It's very, very much not touching. And if let's say I'm gonna make that nice and big. Let's say you're working way out here. You would never know that those 2 points aren't touching. And that's going to affect how the hatch is able to perform, because in fact, the hatch function won't be able to fill this shape unless all of the little corners are filled. This can get really hairy when you have corners that aren't very close, which is why when you are doing technical drafting, you need to make sure that you're making really clean drawings. And really clean drawings means that you have, when you have 2 points that are coincident, that are supposed to be on top of each other, you make sure you use snaps for them, or that you use the fillet command to make sure that they end in the exact same location. So let's go ahead and fillet these together here really quick. So that becomes a closed boundary. Actually, let me show you here what happens if it's not a closed boundary. I'm going to go ahead and run the hatch command. We pick an interior point and it says a closed boundary could not be determined, and it tries to find the location where that broke down. So let's go ahead and fillet those together. And there we go. And let's try the hatch command again. Oops, there we go. You'll notice it fills it, and there we go. And again, because we have that closed boundary established, we can do that. So what constitutes a closed boundary? Any geometry that you have that is a full enclosed loop constitutes a closed boundary. So let's work on some examples of what a closed loop is. Probably the simplest one is a circle, right? And there's no beginning, there's no end, really. And you can hatch that just fine. A hatch comes out just like a dream. And obviously, anything involving lines, as long as the lines are all coincident at the ends, will hatch just fine. So let's talk about hatch settings. I'm going to go ahead and erase these really quick, and we're going to just draw some new geometry here. And we're going to go ahead and hatch this. But let's say I want to change the pattern that the hatch is. So what I can do is I can go to my hatch command. And again, you can get to the hatch command by typing hatch. There's probably something up in the ribbon that allows you to do the same thing. There's probably a hatch option. I'm not familiar with it, again, because I don't really use the ribbon. You'll notice up at the top here, though, when you do initiate the hatch command, you get a hatch creation subsection, and you can go ahead and make all the modifications of this. In fact, everything that I'm about to show you can be modified from inside this palette here as well. So if you don't want to use this, or for whatever reason, if you're averse to using the ribbon, again, you can go back to using the command line. So let's go ahead and type T for settings and bring up this settings dialog. Now in here we can specify what the pattern is going to be, and what color it's going to be, and all the stuff that goes along with that. We can also specify the angle and the scale at which the hatch comes in. We can pick a new origin for the hatch. So for example, if we have shingles on a roof, we can pick where the shingles start. Or here's another one I deal with on a fairly regular basis. Let's say you have a grid ceiling in a building, and you've got these 2 foot by 4 foot ceiling panels that you have to put in. You can define a hatch that's 2 feet by 4 feet, and you can pick the origin where you want it to start and have it accurately populate where those panels are going to be on the ceiling. So the next thing I want to make sure that you're absolutely positively completely aware of here is this options section. You'll notice there's an option for annotative hatching. And again, if you're not familiar with annotative objects, what that means is that whatever the size of the object is in units in model space is going to be the size of that unit in paper space, regardless of the scale that you're plotting at, as long as that object is visible. So if you draw something that's 1 inch here, when you plot it, it'll be 1 inch on paper. If you draw it and it's 50 feet here, it's going to be 50 feet. It's going to try and be 50 feet on paper. The next 2 options here are fairly important, and these are options that I actually use implicitly. I consistently. Specifically, to have an associative hatch, which means that when you move the boundaries of a hatch object, specifically the polygon that it was created in, the hatch will readjust to the shape of the new polygon. And the second one, create separate hatches, means that every time you pick a point, it creates a new hatch object rather than having one big compound hatch object that has hatches all over the place. So let's go ahead and mark both of those. Incidentally, this associative hatch option, having that be selected is actually default, I believe, in AutoCAD 2015. So it's just something to be aware of. We're going to go ahead and pick a hatch pattern here. So let's go ahead and say we want, I don't know, that one looks fun. Let's go ahead and click that, click OK. And now you'll notice down here on the command line it's asking for us to pick an internal point. So let's go ahead and pick an internal point. And there we go. So we have this hatch. And you'll notice, again, if you look at the properties on this hatch, you'll see here we have our origin at 0, 0. And in fact, if you look here and you do some inferring, you'll see here that there should be, this is a portion of a square that's filled with lines, and it starts right here at 0, 0. So that's the origin of the hatch on this. So let's talk about the difference between an associative hatch and a non-associative hatch. And if you recall, we created this as an associative hatch. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch this corner here really quick. You'll notice we pull it out and the hatch comes with it. Let's go ahead and change the properties of this hatch and make it non-associative. Let's see here. Associative, no. Let's do the same thing. I'm going to stretch that corner and pull it out, and notice the hatch stays in the same location. Again, this is default behavior for a lot of versions of AutoCAD. So it's something to be aware of when you're working with AutoCAD, especially older versions of AutoCAD. Associative hatching might not be the default option, so it's something you want to be aware of. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a lot of this, or a lot of this, where you select it and erase it and you rehatch it. So something to be aware of. Let's talk about modifying a hatch a little bit more. So we talked about modifying the boundaries, whether or not it's depending on whether or not it's associative or non-associative. Let's talk about modifying the geometry. So let's say that we have this hatch, right? And this hatch fills this space. Let's say we want to modify the shape of it. So we are going to go ahead and add in this shape here. I'm going to go ahead and trim that out. I'm going to fillet these together. And we've got this new shape. The first thing to notice is that obviously the hatch didn't extend into that space. So how do we make it so it extends in there? There are a couple of options. One is you can actually go back into the settings of the hatch and pick new boundaries for it. And that's completely available. It's absolutely an option. I found that oftentimes, at least for the work that I do, happens to be the long way to get around things. And usually for me it's actually faster just to go ahead and delete the hatch and create a new one. So that's my preferred method of redrawing the hatch boundaries. And if you've got a better way, please leave it in the comments below. It'd be fantastic. I'm always looking for ways to be able to do my work more quickly and more efficiently. So the second way to do this is to use a command called hatch edit. So let's go ahead and type that in. Here we go. Hatch edit. And it will bring up that same dialog that we brought up with the settings. And what you can do is you can make your modifications in here. So for example, if you want to change the boundaries, you can pick new boundaries, or you can select new objects, or whatever you'd like. So this is all available here as well. And again, you can change the pattern from here. You can change the pattern from in the properties, right here under the pattern name. There's probably a right-click option. Let's see here, edit hatch right here. That's going to run the hatch edit dialog that we just picked. Now let's say that we are working with our hatch. We've got pulled out here, and for whatever reason, this boundary gets deleted. So now we're kind of in a bind. Let's say we want to move this point here up, but we want to use the stretch command for whatever reason. You select it, and you'll notice the stretch is just not happening here, right? Or let's say you have a really complicated hatch, and these pick points are no longer showing up because it's exceeded the number that it will actually display. So what you can do is you can use a command called hatch generate boundary. There's also a right-click option here, right here, generate boundary. You can key it in here. So say hatch generate boundary, and you'll notice it puts a boundary in that's exactly the boundaries of the hatch itself again. And given that this is set to be associative, not applicable. And again, if that happens, I would generate the boundary, I'd erase it, hatch it again, and make sure that it's associative. So you can see, yeah, it's associative. So now if we need to move a point, we can move it and it stretches the whole thing. So inevitably the question is going to come up, I want to create my own hatch. How do I go about doing that? And the answer is we're not going to cover that in this video. So if you want to look into it independently, look up .pat files, or go to Google or whatever search engine that you subscribe to, and search for create custom hatch or something like that. So we're going to talk about generating custom hatches in another video, but that's not for this series. One of the things that you're going to encounter when you are hatching and working with hatches is that by default you can't snap to any points in a hatch. So for example, I'm going to draw a line here, and you'll notice I'm not getting my snaps are all turned on. You can see here they're turned on, and I'm not able to snap to anything in the inside here. I can snap to corners, snap to midpoints, I can snap to whatever my snaps are set to, but I can't snap to a hatch. And the way to get around this, and this is intentional, because most of the time you don't want to snap to hatches. Hatches are just there as filler, as patterns, and you don't want to have to deal with your snaps picking up all sorts of crazy stuff. So, but in the event that you do want to snap to your hatch, there's a really quick way to be able to do it, and that's by typing options. I believe you can also get to it from the button up here, and you go to the drafting tab, and you'll see here there's this option right here. It says ignore hatch objects, and if you uncheck that, you'll be able to snap to all these hatch points, and you'll see this is all just regular geometry that AutoCAD is ignoring in terms of the object snaps, because it just makes things a lot more complicated in terms of your drawing here. So that is it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, go and leave them in the comments below. And if you thought this video was good, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you thought it was fantastic, life-changing, go ahead and subscribe. I'll bring you more of them. And I will see you in the next video.